All right. So here we are. Hi. We are live streaming as we record a podcast for the Homeschool High School Podcast. Hi, I'm Sabrina from SevenSistersHomeschool.com.
And I'm Vicky from SevenSistersHomeschool.com.
But we're also from the Homeschool High School Podcast.
Yes, we are.
Because we
have two hats.
We have two hats, but that's what homeschool parents do. They wear multiple hats. And so there you go. So we are going to record a podcast, and we keep hearing about this live streaming thing on YouTube, and we were going to try it. So welcome to the glamorous podcasting studio.
See our banana box?
Yes, we have our banana box here that houses our microphone. Wait, we're going to turn it. You can eat. This is Yeti, our microphone. Isn't that cute? We have a little sheet there for a little,
little
bunny ears on the box. Yeah, there we go. So that's our super high-tech setup for homeschoolers.
That's right. Because in homeschooling, you make happen what you need to make happen.
That's right. For my entire parenting career, I have referred to myself and been known by my children as the make-do girl.
Mm-hmm.
You make do when you're a homeschooler, right? And when you're a mom and when you have kids and all that stuff.
It says motherhood is the necessity of invention.
Good one. Did you just make that up?
No, I made it up a few years ago.
That's really good.
While we were making do with something. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we are making do in our glamorous My Home Office studios. And so we record the Homeschool High School Podcast here, and we try to record on topics that you guys have suggested. Because this is really all about being your big sister and recognizing that we have a new hashtag.
Oh, we did.
I made it up today. Okay,
yeah.
So we want you to understand that we really are homeschool moms. I mean, we're like veterans now because we graduated our youngest kids. But so our new hashtag is "We are just like you, only older." Yeah, man. I'm digging it. So we want the podcast at the Homeschool High School Podcast, and we want lots of the blog posts at SevenSistersHomeschool.com and all of that stuff to be in response to the things that our little sisters are asking about and wondering about and wrestling with and all that stuff. So we're going to get started recording, right? So let me do multiple things here. Again, see, multitasking, because that's what we do.
Yes, we do.
All right.
Here, clicking.
Hello, homeschool friends, and welcome to this episode of the Homeschool High School Podcast from SevenSistersHomeschool.com, brought to you by the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. I'm Sabrina. Today, I am with
Vicky.
And we're going to talk about approaches to teaching literature.
Right. Because we want to talk about whether there's one right way to approach literature.
I wonder if there could be one right way. I think that it's likely that there's not one right way, because there's not one right way to do much of anything about this homeschooling thing.
And especially since it's our hashtag, there's not one right way.
That's right. That's right. We're doing something else that there's not one right way to podcast. And so today we are podcasting and live streaming on YouTube at the same time.
We're also learning how to turn off the volume on the cell phone.
Yes, well, that little chimey noise was quite beautiful. So we're going to forgive you for it. But this is a new thing, and we're going to do it from time to time. And so if you're someone who likes the idea of hopping onto a live stream and seeing behind the scenes with your big sisters. Then here we are with our new hashtag, which is "We're just like you, only older." So,
And so you can find us at Seven Sisters Homeschool on YouTube.
Yes.
And subscribe there, because we have lots of how-tos.
Yes.
And
we have lots of how-to videos already on YouTube, and we also have a large chunk of additional videos that we're getting ready to add to our YouTube channel.
Yes.
That were actually created on Facebook, but then we realized that they were not available to people who were following us on YouTube only. So we want to put those up there. So if you are able to give us your feedback, that really helps shape the future episodes of the podcast. It's important to us that we're not just throwing our curriculum in your face all the time. I mean, we think our curriculum is wonderful.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
We love it. We used it.
Our kids liked it.
The kids in our local community liked it. It's been, vetted by real teens for many years. So yeah, we think it's fabulous, but these are not supposed to be commercials for Seven Sisters curriculum. They're supposed to be big sister help, advice, and encouragement for your homeschool.
Because in the scriptures in Titus 2, it talks about the more mature women,
just like you, only older.
So we're homeschool moms.
Do you have a hashtag in the footnotes in my study Bible? I should check and see.
But that we're supposed to invest in the younger generation, because why should they have to invent the wheel if there are some things that we can save them some pain and suffering? So younger sisters, we're so glad you're here.
Yes. And we are going to hopefully help you not have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to approaches to teaching literature.
There we go.
So there's our segue to our topic. So it would be a lovely world for homeschoolers if every kid just loved every book put in front of them, understood every book put in front of them, could intelligently peel away the layers of ideas there, and would love reading for the rest of their lives, no problem. But that's actually not what a lot of homeschoolers experience.
Yeah, I imagine that there are some kids who just are natural literature readers, and they just understand at a deep level when they read, and then that excites them to read even more.
Yeah, there are those kids for sure. I have a niece, Seven Sister Allison's oldest, was such a book lover that sometimes we had to make a rule that she wasn't allowed to read.
So it was her punishment.
Well, it would be her punishment, but like she would read at inappropriate times socially, So if your grandparents are taking you out for a one-on-one dinner for a special time with them, and you're riding to the restaurant in the car and they're asking you chatty questions about your life and what interests you, and you say, "I'm reading right now," put the book away. So there are kids that
there are,
yes, but none of mine were that kid. Just being honest here.
Yeah. And each kid has their own learning best style. And so to have different approaches to literature is a perfectly reasonable thing.
Yes. And then you've got to take into account mom's style too, because if mom is primary teacher, which is the case in most homeschool families, mom's own experience with literature is going to affect the climate. And that's okay. That's more than okay. It's really important for moms to ask themselves, how do they really feel about reading? And has this been an enjoyable thing for them or something that's been a chore? Because it is going to affect the child.
So God's not confused. He knows what moms he put with what kids, and that there's this intersection, like a Venn diagram.
Yes. Oh, I like Venn diagrams. I don't like math, but I like Venn diagrams.
Yeah. So you got the mom and the kid and the different learning styles and worldviews, and you put them together. And hopefully there's a literature approach that works for both.
Yeah. So there are a couple of really widely used, accepted, and understood approaches. Let's talk about the traditional literature textbook approach first.
Yeah.
And this is what a lot of us did in traditional school, public school, whatever, high school. And what's interesting is when I was in college prep English literature class, we used textbooks. When I moved up to honors in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, we quit using the textbooks and we went to real books.
Is that right?
I never thought of that until this very moment.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So,
of course, when I was in high school, there wasn't such a thing as different levels. Giving away my age there. So, but yeah, and we use these textbooks in high school. So most of us are familiar with the literature textbook. It does all the work for you. So it tells all kinds of different themes and approaches and understanding literature skills and all in one handy textbook. So you just plow your way through the textbook over the year.
And sometimes you're reading short stories, and sometimes you're reading poetry, and sometimes you're reading excerpts or cuttings from a novel.
Right.
But it's kind of a piecemeal thing because they want to make sure that you're getting a little taste of this and a dose of that. And so the whole year is sort of structured. I've always felt like that is more about understanding how to analyze literature than it is about appreciating literature.
Absolutely. So the goal is they're usually called like themes in literature.
Right.
So it's how many themes can we grab or cram into or pull out of different pieces of literature. So the approach is how much can we get into it as far as the topics.
Okay.
Yeah, so themes and ideas and analysis, like you said.
And that's okay. That's a really great fit for a lot of kids. What types of learners would you see gravitating toward that kind of thing? I think of, over the years that I've taught literature in our homeschool community to group classes and co-ops, my more literal, concrete thinkers have tended to like that kind of thing, because the introduction notes and the sidebars keep reminding them of what it is that they're supposed to be noticing.
Yeah. And I think that's helpful for them too, because it's very short.
Yeah.
So reading a whole book is sometimes a little intimidating for some kids. And so if they have an excerpt from a book or a 5-page short story, then they feel more accomplished because they got something done.
Yeah. Yeah. What kinds of kids is that not such a great fit for?
Kids who get really irritated when you kill the book and overteach them. Yeah, really. I mean, some kids, a lot of kids will pull their hair out with the traditional textbook. So it's not dissing textbooks, like it works for some kids.
Kids that it works for.
Yeah,
and it doesn't work for the kids that it doesn't work for.
And so they hate literature courses because it's killing the book. And so you say, well, there's so many rich themes. There are at least 6 different kinds of character development going on here. And they go like, I like this story.
Right. And you're wrecking it for me. Yeah. Okay, so personal story time here. So I had college prep literature in 9th grade, and then I switched to honors, which was more real book based. But even there, really heavy on the comprehension piece of it.
The comprehension.
Really heavy on the comprehension piece of it, less on the analysis. So lots and lots and lots of questions that felt really insulting.
Like, what happened to Sally after she walked through the door?
Exactly.
Like, I read the book. I know what happened to Sally.
Who punched her in the nose? Okay, well, if I didn't notice who punched her in the nose, like, really, you had to point that out to make sure that I read that? It just,
I think the reason why they do those kinds of questions at high school level, unless the kids have learning issues and really need to learn to pay attention, is just to make sure they read the book.
Yeah, I think you're right. So then I got to college, and I was an English major, and so I took several literature classes, which were very literature textbook approach. And sometime soon after that, in my early 20s, I quit reading for close to a decade. I was so tired of people telling me what to get out of the book that I was reading.
Like, this is what you're supposed to do with it.
It burned me out on reading, no lie. I barely picked up a book that I wasn't required to read for some situation that I was in, for 10 years. And I resolved that I never wanted my kids to experience that when we started homeschooling them. And so for a kid who loves it, it's great. It's not souring them on it. But if your kid is foaming at the mouth and rolling their eyes and saying, you're killing this for me, you're killing this, you should listen to that, because it actually can do like long-term damage to their ability to engage with books. So different readers, right?
Yeah, so there's the approaches of reading whole books that are very comprehension based. And did you actually read the book? What happened then? And so it's very good for people who like the story but are very linear thinkers. And or that mom needs to make sure they actually read the book.
Yep.
Of course, they could probably get it from Cliff Notes these days.
They probably could. And that's why Cliff Notes were so completely not allowed when I was in high school, because it was a way to not read the book. But we could talk about Cliff Notes at the end of this podcast.
Yeah,
because it ties right into this.
And we got a YouTube about it.
We do. Yeah. So, okay. So we've talked about the textbook approach. We've talked about whole books that focus on comprehension. There are also then study guides to accompany whole books that do comprehension and analysis and try to do a really comprehensive analysis. So they kind of want to dig into every possible thing that you could find in that book.
So then you have these marvelous study guides that take the book to pieces.
And there are 110 pages on the Scarlet Letter. 110 pages of study guide material.
And you're doing every theme and every character and just digesting it in little pieces, and lots of good comprehension and inferential questions, which are important, like figure this out kind of stuff. What do you think about? So there, but enormously detailed.
Yeah. Very time consuming.
Yeah.
And for some kids, the, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess the inferential questions are not guided because there's so many possible conclusions and they want you to consider all of them. And in particular, for more concrete thinkers, the what do you think this meant is a really intimidating, overwhelming question. It is something that they're going to do a whole lot better in a little bit of discussion with them, where you're helping them think about how to think in that way.
Yeah, which is what inferential questions are good for. Is how do you think? How do you develop those skills? How do you learn to perspective take? So they're marvelous for that. And
but they may or may not work well just on a page. Often some relational component is really helpful for those. So other kids love them. Other kids just eat them up and
so they'll pull their hair out at comprehension questions, but they really enjoy the engagement of the inferential ones. So for those who have kids who want to tear a book to pieces, like the kids who ride in the car with the grandparents and just want to know every detail, the kids that are future English majors maybe. They would love these really big, in-depth study guides to just take one book to pieces.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to get to the shameless self-promotion portion of the podcast. This is still not a commercial, though. It's just explaining what literature curriculum from SevenSistersHomeschool.com does and why.
Yeah, because what we found with our kids when we started co-oping together and we would get the teens together in a group, they had opinions about the monster field guides.
Oh, yes.
And they had opinions about textbooks that you only get chunks of, and they're just taking things to pieces, and they didn't like them. And we had very vocal teens.
Yes, we did. We encouraged them to be vocal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We wanted them engaged in that process of owning their education in high school.
Absolutely. So what we found is that we had to take the books that they wanted to study or that we thought would enrich their life experience and make a study guide that covered only one or two themes so that they could take and not kill the book, but get richness out of those things and not spend 20 hours a week on one study guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we're essentially trying to pull the best opportunities out of each approach and avoid the worst pitfalls in each approach. And that doesn't mean that a Seven Sisters Literature Study Guide is a perfect fit then for every type of student.
No.
But it means for the most part, there's not overkill.
Yeah.
And for the most part, there's not busy work in terms of comprehension questions that aren't really necessary for most students.
So we always throw a few in there just to keep kids tracking through the book. But we also really heavily weight on good inferential questions where there's not a one right answer.
Yes. Now, it's funny because that is occasionally confusing or frustrating to parents who get the answer key that goes with the study guide and find that several of the answers in the answer key are answers will vary, and any answer that indicates that the student has actually thought this out and is giving support for their opinion is acceptable. And there are moms, let's just admit who we are. Some of us moms really want there to be a right answer.
It's so much easier that way.
Yes.
Yeah, and we found that in the answer keys that we had to do answers will vary, and it needs to show the student has interacted with the material. An example might be.
Yes.
And so
we tried to provide examples might be.
Yeah. And
some of the things that your student might mention likely, could include,
yeah. And we'll take actual things that the students have answered in our group classes, or our own kids have answered, and kind of throw edited versions of that in there as samples, not as a one right answer. But we don't overkill the questions, inferential or comprehension, because what we want is for the kids to end that study guide in that book with actually have had a good experience, have enjoyed it. Like, I think I want to read the next book.
I have always enjoyed talking with teens when we start a literature class at the beginning of a semester or the beginning of a year or whatever. And I tell them that what I'm hoping I'm going to encourage them to do over the course of the class is to develop a relationship with each of the books that they read. Whether they feel like that's a relationship with the author who wrote the book, as they have been inspired by that author's ideas, or been irritated and challenged and provoked by that author's ideas that they disagree with, or whether it's a time period and a setting, historical, or a socioeconomic class of people in a particular, whether it's a setting type thing that they interact with. But I'm hoping that they are going to bring themselves to the book, because a book sitting on a shelf is just a bunch of words on a page. When you read it, you are bringing your own experiences, your own opinions, your own fears, your own everything to it. I think we have a YouTube on that too. Don't we? On helping teens develop a relationship with literature. But if we are encouraging our kids to do that, then we almost have to put boundaries on how much are we asking you to analyze in this book. And one of the lovely things to remember is you don't have to only read a book once in your life if you really liked it. So our study guides typically say at the beginning, for the purposes of this reading of the book, we're going to ask you to focus on symbolism, because there's so much symbolism in this book. There's also a ton of other really good things in this book, and you can dig into those if you would like, but you don't have to. Because in this study guide, that's all we're going to cover, because we don't want to kill the book. We want them to want to read it again, or read another one like it, or another one by the author, to love to read. The other thing that Seven Sisters guides do that varies whether this happens in other types of literature curriculum or not, is once all of that is done and all that thinking has happened, then we ask them to write somehow in response to it. But the type of writing varies a lot, and it's not so much about writing instruction as it is putting into articulate paragraphs the things that you experienced as you read this book.
So we don't require them to turn it out as a polished 5-paragraph essay or research paper, and so we don't have a rubric for that. If you wanted to import that over into an essay that you're counting,
and there's no instruction there. There's nothing about sentence fragments. There's nothing reminding them to state their thesis in the first sentence of their paragraph. It's not about the writing instruction at that point. It's about the sit and simmer a little bit, those ideas and those things that you thought about and noticed, and let it kind of roll around in your brain, and then talk to me about it.
Because we want our kids to be thinkers, not parrots.
Yes. Ooh, say that again. That was good.
We want our kids to be thinkers, not parrots.
Yes. Parrots are lovely if you're into having a bird for a pet, but it's not real learning when your kid is just saying back what they've been told to say. Yeah, especially not when it comes to literature. So another thing that we included, because in our co-ops and even in our families, there were different kinds of learners. And so we had some kids who, like Sister Allison's kid, or a couple of mine, who loved the books. And they wanted to do more with the study guide. And then we had some who were like, I'm going to do what I'm required to do, and I'm going to have a good attitude and like it. But I just want to do it's a lot of work for me to just even read this book.
So we're just going to do this. So we have with the guides on how to adjust the levels for credit. So a kid who wants a high-powered honors credit, there are some extra engagements that they can do with the book, and it's outlined what to do with that. Kids who have special needs, how to adjust, reading out loud or discussing the questions out loud. So there's all different levels that are included.
Right. And that's something that we try to do with all of our curriculum at Seven Sisters, is make it easy to adapt it to whatever level you need for your homeschool, for that student, for that year.
Because we're homeschool moms, and we know that kids have different levels.
That's right. And the same kid has different needs in different years.
Yeah.
So the flexibility, there is not one right way to do this stuff, and being open to adapting the curriculum with a little bit of help from your big sisters who say, here are some ways that you might want to adapt it that might work well. And additionally, we, in many of the literature guides, offer supplemental resource ideas to help bring the book to a greater level of appreciation. It's not so much about understanding it better as it is appreciating it more. For example, there's a study guide to accompany Corrie ten Boom's The Hiding Place. And listed in the supplemental resources are things like a link to a YouTube video done in the site of the house where the hiding place was, taking you through so that you actually see how incredibly small the space was where they were hiding Jews from the Nazis. So just some things to really help the kids grab onto it. But additionally, some of the books that are super challenging, we have recommended that you go to places like Cliff Notes.
Yes.
And the reason is that Cliff Notes were never intended to replace the reading of the book. They were written to be an aid for a student who's struggling to understand and make sense of all of it. When they're used the way they should be, it's almost like having the benefit of a class discussion in front of you. You're getting several different perspectives. You're getting, here, you might want to think about it this way. And some critics over time have said this and this and this. And for a kid who's stuck on a section of a book and saying, wait, I don't even understand what just happened. That can be so helpful. And there's an integrity issue. You need to actually read the book if you're saying that you read the book.
I know with one of my kids, we were doing the study guide for Plato's Republic.
Yes.
I can talk. And it's such a valuable experience.
It's hard.
But it is. It's old Greek.
Yeah.
And it's big ideas.
Big ideas.
And so for kids who are used to reading, Snapchats, like little tiny chunks of information, carrying a big thought for a long way was a real mental exercise. And so we had the study guide, you had my kid in your class, so we had the
class discussions.
And then we used audiobooks to listen to it, and we did it together. One is because I'd never read it and I was curious, but also my kid wanted to bounce back what he thought he was hearing. And we read the Cliff Notes also. So we really digested, but that was because my kid was really interested in what on earth this Plato's Republic was. Like that, he was really
why
interested.
I remember from class discussions, him also liking the impact that it has had on so many thinkers and writers and politicians and everything over centuries and centuries and centuries. So why this profound impact? And you can't always do that when you're 15 years old and you're reading a book with challenging vocabulary. And you're trying to get your math done and you're going to soccer practice and you're,
The fun thing about that is that it ignited his interest in philosophy. And so he and some of our other kids ended up doing Seven Sisters Philosophy in 4 Questions.
And History and Philosophy of the Western World. And loving this concept that, there are these really big, profound ideas that have indeed shaped the world. And I want to learn more about that. So it can be a real springboard if you will make it accessible. If it's hard, that's okay. But if it's hard and it burns you out and you give up and walk away in disgust, that's not okay.
So you want them to be inspired, not tired.
That's good too. There's another hashtag.
We're just
inspired, not tired.
Kim will listen to this episode and turn out another bunch of t-shirts.
That's right. Kim has all kinds of t-shirts that she wants us to make with Seven Sisters isms on them. All right, have we covered all the main points? Because we're about out of
we do.
time. Approaches to literature. So the takeaway from this is that it's okay to decide what approach you are going to take to literature in your homeschool. And you can decide it for this season, for this kid, and you can change that at another time or for another kid, because there are different approaches and they can all be effective.
And they're not one right way.
There is not one right way. So for more on teaching literature, for more encouragement and practical strategies and ideas for teaching literature in a co-op instead of one-on-one, all of those things can be found at sevensistershomeschool.com. There are blog posts to bless you, and there are even freebies in the ebook store to encourage your teaching of literature in your homeschool. We hope this has been helpful to you. And again, please give us feedback on topics that you would like to hear discussed by your big sisters.
Indeed.
Yeah. So thank you for being here. This has been the Homeschool High School Podcast from SevenSistersHomeschool.com, brought to you by the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.
Yay! And now we have to figure out how to stop the YouTube.
Well, there we are. I'm switching my windows around. Hello. Yeah. You could see us, but we covered you up with GarageBand. I mean, nothing personal. It's just GarageBand is so much fun to watch. As it makes a little squiggly line.
We're easily amused.
We're really easily amused. Okay, so now we save twice because we're very afraid of losing our files.
Indeed.
And we never know what to call them. But it's okay because Vicky's son Seth edits everything and he just changes the titles if I pick something stupid.
Approaches to teaching literature for now.
All right, that'll work. And we save it here so that we know where. See, I save it on my desktop because if I just let it save to GarageBand, I might forget how to get there and find the file later. One of the most common questions that I answer in customer email for SevenSistersHomeschool.com is, I downloaded my files and now I can't find them. So just like you, only older. Yeah, I have to save my GarageBand podcast file on the desktop or I might not be able to find it later. All right, and then we are done for today. So if you were here, that's so weird and so cool.
And that episode will be edited and live somewhere toward the end of January or beginning of February, just according to where it goes in Seth's editing progression.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So teaching literature, different approaches, and Homeschool High School podcasting.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here. See ya.